You know that feeling when you think you've finally escaped a nightmare, only to realize the monster is standing right in front of the exit, holding the keys? That was my Tuesday morning. I'm sitting in the cab of a Penske moving truck, engine idling, ready to leave the suburbs forever, when I hear this distinct, heavy clank of metal on metal. I look in the side mirror, and there she is. Brenda Holloway, the dictator of Oakhaven Ridge, wearing her signature neon yellow safety vest, literally chaining my moving truck to her own mailbox. The padlock clicked shut with a finality that echoed down the street, and she just stood there, arms crossed over her chest, smirk plastered on her face like she just won the lottery, blocking the only exit out of this suburban hellscape. "You are not leaving this jurisdiction without my written authorization," she shrieked, her voice cracking like bad drywall. I hopped out, trying to keep my cool, and reached for the chains, but she shoved me. Actually put her hands on me, pushing me back into the gravel, screaming that the chains were now community assets because they were touching HOA ground. Then she snatched my house keys right out of my hand. That's when the rocks started flying. She started pelting the windshield of the rental truck with landscaping stones, spiderwebbing the glass while my driver ducked, looking at me with eyes that said, "Dude, this lady is demons." "I'm calling the cops," I yelled. "You're stealing my property." But here's the thing Brenda didn't know, the one tiny detail that was about to turn her power trip into a federal indictment. My son, Elijah, isn't just some guy in a suit. He's a special agent with the FBI, and what she just did wasn't just annoying. It was about 6 different felonies. Let's rewind a bit so you understand how we got to this level of insanity. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 58, a retired contractor, and apparently the most wanted criminal in the history of Oakhaven Ridge. 2 years ago, cancer took my wife, Eleanor, and this house, which used to be our dream home, just became a museum of grief. Her coffee cup was still by the sink, her reading glasses on the nightstand, and the silence in the hallways was deafening. I couldn't breathe there anymore, so I bought a quiet cabin up near Lake Serenity, a place Eleanor and I used to talk about retiring to. I thought selling this paid-off house would be my ticket to peace, but I forgot about Brenda. Imagine a prison warden who shops at heavy discounts and hates fun. That's her. She's ruled our HOA board for 8 years, terrorizing the neighborhood with a ruler in one hand and a citation pad in the other, fining people for planting the wrong shade of petunias. 3 weeks before I tried to leave, I did everything by the book, submitted my 30-day notice, paid every fee, 0 debts, clean slate. Brenda rejected it. She stood up in the board meeting, under the buzzing fluorescent lights, and told me I failed the community impact assessment, a rule that didn't exist, and said I needed to hire a certified transition consultant. The cost? $2,500. The consultant? Her sister, Linda. It was extortion, plain and simple, and when I refused, the war began. Orange cones blocked my driveway at 3 a.m. Signs saying unauthorized relocation zone popped up on my lawn. And then the letters started going to the sellers of my new cabin, telling them I was a fugitive fleeing debt. It was lies, all of it, but real estate deals are fragile, and she was trying to shatter mine. My son, Elijah, called me from D.C. that night, listening to me vent. "Dad, this sounds like harassment," he said, his voice dropping into that calm, dangerous tone he uses when he's working a case. I laughed it off, told him it was just suburban drama, not the mafia. But I was wrong. I didn't know it then, but my late wife Eleanor had been looking into Brenda before she got sick, hiding USB drives and bank records in places I'd never look. My wife died trying to protect this neighborhood, and I was about to find out exactly why. Moving day, 7 a.m. The truck pulls up, and by 7:15, Brenda is out there in her bathrobe and curlers, screaming about illegal commercial vehicles and visitor parking. When that didn't work, she demanded to inspect every single box for stolen community property. She actually believed the architectural plans for the house belonged to the HOA. When she realized I wasn't going to let her rummage through my wife's old clothes, she disappeared and came back with the chains. And she brought backup, 3 terrified neighbors flanking her like a sad, suburban militia. She pointed a finger at me and announced, "Arthur Vance, you are in violation of Code 47B, asset theft," and pointed at my mailbox. "That mailbox belongs to the association until exit procedures are finalized," she declared. She was claiming ownership of my house numbers, my address, my physical identity. It was insane, but then she pulled out zip ties, actual plastic cuffs, and said she was making a citizen's arrest. My driver stepped back, recording everything on his phone, grinning because Brenda had tried to bribe him $200 earlier to accidentally break my furniture. He had it all on tape. I looked at her back up, my neighbor Tom, and saw the fear in his eyes. She threatened to fine me for my fence height if I didn't stand here, he whispered. The elderly lady behind him, Mrs. Higgins, was shaking. Brenda had threatened to report her dog. These weren't supporters, they were hostages. I called 911. Brenda called 911 too, screaming about theft and assault. When the cops arrived, the squad cars painting the morning with red and blue light, Brenda switched instantly into victim mode, crying fake tears about how I was stealing community assets. The officer, a tired guy named Officer Miller, looked at my deed, looked at Brenda, and basically told her that HOA bylaws don't override the U.S. Constitution or property rights. He saw the zip ties and asked her, "Ma'am, did you attempt to restrain this man?" She proudly said yes. The silence that followed was heavy. The police left with a warning, but as I watched Brenda marching back to her house, furious and humiliated, I knew this wasn't over. The metallic taste of adrenaline was still in my mouth. She wasn't just going to let me leave. That night, 2 a.m., my doorbell rings. It's Brenda, wearing a fake security uniform, holding a flashlight, demanding an emergency structural inspection. I slammed the door in her face. By morning, she had filed a report with the city claiming I had done unpermitted electrical work that endangered the whole block. The city inspector came out, a nice guy, looked around for 10 minutes, saw my pristine permits, and called the complaint frivolous. But as he was leaving, Brenda marched out to her mailbox, shouting at imaginary police officers, waving papers, claiming I had stolen $5,000 worth of assets, including my own driveway. She was itemizing my asphalt, folks. She was claiming ownership of the ground I walked on. But then came the escalation that changed everything. My moving company called, panicked. They received a cease and desist letter from a law firm called HOA Legal Group, threatening to sue them for conspiracy to commit theft. I Googled it. The firm didn't exist. It was a letterhead she made in Microsoft Word. Then, I came home to find my locks changed. A note on the door said, "Property secured by HOA Protocol 15J. She had broken into my house. I had to pay a locksmith to get back into my own home, and when I got inside, I saw she had rifled through my drawers. But on the kitchen counter, she left a mistake. A manila envelope with bank statements for the consulting firm her sister ran. It showed HOA funds being transferred to a shell company. Sarah always said criminals eventually hang themselves with their own rope, and Brenda had just tied the noose. I took photos of everything and called Elijah. "Dad," he said, "breaking and entering is bad, but stealing information is burglary. And using a fake law firm to threaten a business? That's wire fraud." But Brenda wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up to a fake lien on my door claiming I owed $15,000 in lifestyle violations, including fines for not attending meetings while my wife was dying in the hospital. Then, the nuclear option, Child Protective Services called me. Someone had reported that my son, an FBI agent, was mentally unstable. Then my real estate agent called. Someone told the sellers of my cabin that I was under federal investigation. She was systematically destroying my life, my son's career, and my future. Elijah called me back, his voice tight. "Dad, internal affairs just pulled me in. She filed a complaint saying I'm using federal resources for a vendetta. They've restricted my database access." That was the moment it stopped being a neighborhood dispute and became a war. Brenda had made the fatal mistake of threatening a federal agent's livelihood. Elijah told me to sit tight, that she was destroying herself, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like I was drowning. That evening, a guy in a cheap suit showed up to serve me foreclosure papers. They looked real, fake court seals, forged judge signatures, but the case number was wrong. I told the guy they were fake, and he cracked immediately, admitting the lady paid him $50. I snapped photos of him, the car, the papers, and sent it all to Elijah. My son ran the data and found out Brenda Holloway had pulled this scam in 3 other states, moving every few years right before the law caught up with her. She was a serial predator. Elijah flew in the next morning, carrying a briefcase and the grim expression of a man ready to burn the world down legally. "We need to go through Mom's office," he said. I hadn't touched Eleanor's desk in 2 years. It felt like violating a shrine. But Elijah went straight to her jewelry box, found a tiny key under her wedding ring, and unlocked the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet. My heart broke all over again when I saw the file labeled Brenda, Federal Crimes. Eleanor knew. She had documented everything before the chemo got too bad. We opened the file, and the scale of it hit us like a physical blow. Brenda hadn't just stolen a few bucks. She had rigged the election to become board director. The real votes showed Mrs. Higgins had won. She was funneling money into her sister's fake consulting firm for wellness audits and tree removal for trees that didn't exist. We're talking $127,000 in fake maintenance. And the kicker? Brenda owned 7 properties in the county, all bought with cash through shell companies, all purchased from distressed neighbors she had harassed until they sold cheap. She was laundering the stolen HOA money through real estate. Then I read Eleanor's handwritten note. She knows I'm looking. She offered to pay for my treatment if I stopped. When I said no, she said it would be tragic if my medical care was interrupted. I had to sit down. The room spun. Brenda had threatened my dying wife. She used my wife's cancer as leverage. Elijah looked at the paper, his knuckles white. "She's done, Dad. We have the roadmap." We realized my move wasn't just an annoyance to her. It was a threat. Selling my house would trigger an audit that would expose her laundering scheme. She literally couldn't afford to let me leave. We needed an army. Mrs. Higgins knocked on the door 20 minutes later with a stack of spreadsheets. Turns out, she wasn't just a sweet old lady. She was a retired IRS auditor with 42 years of experience hunting tax cheats. "I've been tracking the discrepancies for 3 years," she said, dropping a forensic accounting bomb on my kitchen table. She showed us the pattern. Every month, exactly $2,847 went to the fake consulting firm, just under the $3,000 threshold that triggers automatic bank reporting. It was textbook structuring. Then neighbors started pouring in. Tom, Mike, people who had been bullied into silence, bringing receipts of cash bribes they paid to avoid fake fines. We were building a RICO case in my living room. As we built the case, Brenda's paranoia spiked. She started patrolling the streets at night. Then, she broke into my house again. My new security cameras caught her dressed like a ninja, planting bags of white powder in my kitchen. She called the cops on me for drug possession. When the police tested it, it was baking soda. She was trying to frame me for felonies. Then she slashed the tires on my moving truck. Deep, angry cuts. She sent a cease and desist to the moving company, bribing the dispatcher to lose my shipment. But her biggest mistake was calling the FBI again. She called the public corruption hotline and admitted to photographing agents and monitoring their comms, stalking federal officers. She confessed to a felony on a recorded line. Elijah's supervisor, Agent Williams, listened to the tape and decided Brenda needed to go down. But Brenda, in her infinite delusion, kept digging. She hired another fake process server to hand me a federal restraining order. It was a bad forgery, wrong court address, misspelled judge's name. The poor guy serving it almost fainted when I told him he was committing federal document fraud. She was dragging innocent people into her web of crimes. Then she went after Mrs. Higgins, calling ICE and claiming the 70-year-old naturalized citizen was an illegal immigrant with fake papers. She tried to have my son arrested by the Capitol Police for domestic terrorism, claiming he was bringing weapons to the HOA meeting. She was swatting us, one by one. The finale of her insanity came when a convoy of fake U.S. Marshals pulled up, actors she hired, to seize my house. When I told them they were impersonating federal officers, they fled. She had run out of moves. So, she called a press conference. Local news crews, looking for a juicy story, gathered on her lawn. Brenda, looking like a manic lawyer, announced she was suing me, my son, and Mrs. Higgins for a criminal conspiracy. A reporter, Jennifer Wu, asked for proof. Brenda held up Eleanor's stolen investigation file, the very documents that proved her guilt, and waved them around, claiming they were evidence against us. Elijah texted me from the hotel. She just confessed on live TV. It's over. Saturday evening. The emergency HOA meeting. The community center was packed. 89 homeowners, news crews, the works. It felt less like a board meeting and more like a gladiator arena. Brenda stood at the podium, flanked by fake security, radiating arrogance. She launched into a PowerPoint presentation detailing my theft of $200,000. She displayed bank statements on the screen, real statements, that showed money moving into her own shell company, Neighborhood Enhancement Group, LLC. She was literally walking the audience through her own money laundering scheme, convinced she was framing me. The vice president of the board stood up and interrupted her. "Brenda, we voted to remove you." Brenda laughed, a high, shrill sound. "You can't remove me. I have evidence." Then Mrs. Higgins stood up. "Brenda, I have a recording of you offering me $5,000 to silence me." She played it into the microphone. The room went silent. Brenda gasped like a fish out of water. Then Elijah stood up in the front row. He pulled out his badge, the gold catching the light, and the air left the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Special Agent Elijah Vance. Brenda Holloway, you are under federal investigation for mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering." Brenda tried to run. She actually bolted for the fire exit, but real FBI agents were waiting in the back row. Agent Williams slapped the cuffs on her, and the sound of that ratcheting metal was sweeter than any symphony. "You're facing 23 federal charges," he announced. As they walked her out, shouting about conspiracies, the room erupted. Not in anger, but in applause. A standing ovation for her arrest. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Brenda was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, plus 5 years of supervised release. The judge called her a predator who betrayed the public trust. She was ordered to pay back $520,000 in restitution, every penny she stole, recovered from seizing her 7 properties and her luxury cars. Her sister Linda flipped on her for a plea deal. The neighborhood transformed overnight. Mrs. Higgins took over the finances, the pool actually got built, and the stolen money was returned to the victims in surprise refund checks. 3 months later, I'm sitting on the porch of my cabin at Lake Serenity. The sun is coming up over the water, painting the sky in purples and oranges. No chains, no fake fines, just the smell of pine and coffee. I read the news that Brenda had been transferred to Arizona to face more charges for her past scams. She's likely never getting out. Elijah told me his field office uses this case as training material now. My wife's investigation didn't just save our neighborhood, it changed state laws. They passed Eleanor's Law in Texas, requiring independent audits for HOAs. I lifted my mug to the sky. We did it, Eleanor. It's a strange thing, finding justice. It doesn't bring her back, but it makes the world feel a little less chaotic. It proved that even when the system is rigged by a tyrant with a clipboard, ordinary people can tear it down if they stand together. Brenda thought she was the law. She forgot that the law actually exists to protect people like us from people like her. So, here's my question to you. At what point does following the rules become complicity in a crime? If your neighbors hadn't been terrified, Brenda would have been stopped years ago. How many Brendas are out there right now, ruling their tiny kingdoms, banking on your silence? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a nightmare HOA experience, because trust me, you might be sitting on the next federal case. Don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started exposing the corrupt. Stay safe, and remember, trust but verify.